Okay, I'm talking with Miss Freda Mohr in her home on about November 24th, 1969, on a gorgeous day, with a beautiful view. I just wanted to really talk very informally with you, Ms. Mohr, about your own ideas, and we have talked before, but I really want to do it again on tape and with a little different focus now that I'm focusing on history. You said that you arrived here 40 years ago, which would be 1928. Tell me what the Jewish community was like at the time that you came.
Well, why don't I tell you about what the Jewish Family Service was, and then go from there into the community.
Okay.
I came there as the first student in training that they ever had from the School of Social Work at the University of Southern California. The agency was located in an office building downtown, the Insurance Exchange building. There were a half a dozen caseworkers. None of them had any training. I believe one volunteer was a college graduate. The director was Lenore Levin, who's one of the people I think you should see. She was the executive director of the agency at that time.
Is her name still Levin? Levin?
Yeah, she was married at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Irving Lipsitch was the director of the Federation.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it was one of the most confusing places I had ever been in. I had been in the business world and came as an older student because there was a period of 9 years between the time I graduated high school and went to college, so I was older. And I went into social work with high hopes of social work as a profession and of service to people. And I was, of course, very disappointed at what I found. There seemed no relationship at all between anything the School of Social Work taught and the practice of the agency.
Students don't say that.
And it's still true. And that's why the students are rebelling now. However, the difference is much greater then than it is now. Because you can't go into a social agency now without finding trained people. There was not one person who had had any training in the field of social work. The secretaries had as much to say about what went on as the professional workers. And I think that they liked me personally, and that's why I got along. Otherwise, I don't think I could have tolerated it, or I don't think they could have tolerated me. What happened was that while I was at the University of Southern California, Dr. Earl Young was my advisor. He, at that time, was writing the first manual for the Bureau of Public Assistance, the then the County Welfare Department. I'd had a lot of experience with manuals because I'd worked in an insurance office. Everything was written down. I came from an atmosphere of orders, management, excellent equipment. It was the first insurance company that had Walter Dill Scott tests for the insurance man. I had been to Hartford, Connecticut. I had come from an office where every year the typewriters were changed, where they had complete modern library bureau equipment. I had myself equipped the office after my trip to Hartford. Well, you walk into the first agency. There weren't two chairs that matched. There was a tremendous amount of disorder everywhere. No management. As part of one of my school assignments, I helped Miss Dr. Young write the manual by going to the Bureau of Public Assistance, then the county welfare, and interviewing the people, finding out what they did. And this manual was produced. Later, when I came to the Jewish Family Service, the Jewish Aid Society, as a student, I worked in the Boyle Heights district office. And when my student training was over, I went to the downtown office in the Insurance Exchange building. And the first thing that I was asked to do was to write a manual for the Jewish Family Service, Jewish Aid Society. And this started the reorganization of the agency. And it was the first time that any attempt was made to relate to the other agencies in terms of what they did and what their relationship was with the Jewish Aid Society. There was a lot of conflict between the agencies, all of the community. There still is a lot of it, but it was quite different then. People didn't speak to each other very much. One of the agencies that the Jewish Aid Society worked with most closely was the then Cedars of Lebanon Hospital. Casper Cohen. And so I had a pretty free rein about writing this manual. And I went out to the Casper Cohen Hospital, that was then on Whittier, and they were at that time making the plans, doing the plans for the Cedars of Lebanon. Well, I talked with Mrs. Metzler, who was the superintendent there, and spent the whole day, telephoned a couple of times to the office. She invited me to stay for lunch and meet with the doctors. And she went over the plans with me, said she had to go over them again and again. And about 4 o'clock I appeared at the office, and they were quite horrified to think that I had gone to the Cedars or to the Casper Cohen. They would have never allowed me to go there. If they'd known that that's where I was going, they would have told me not to go. So I had perfectly wonderful time. Excuse me. I guess that's Mrs. Edith.
You can pick up from that.
While I was at the Casper Cohen Hospital, I procured all the information about how the hospital operated, about their rates, about how they felt about the agencies, and all the difficulties they had working with the agencies. And this was then written up. And so I went to every agency in the whole Jewish group and got the same kind of information. It was done. And you will find in the office that very first manual, and I think I'd look at it.
I'd love to find it. I've been looking for it.
Oh, it's there. Now, every time the manual was rewritten, one volume was kept unchanged, so that you should have from 1928 on every revision. So that if you look at those, you're going to see just how the agency moves from year to year.
I've been asking for that, and so far they haven't found it.
Well, it's perfectly amazing. I'm sure they must be there.
You think it might be in the basement?
No.
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 In the office somewhere.
I'll tell you, the last time I knew about it, they were in that little library room where the mimeograph is. And you should find
I'll
them.
look there.
There will be a study of the various manuals. Will give you the changing, all the
I'm
changing
anxious to
things.
find that. I'll look in the library.
It's not in, they weren't in the library. I think they were in the room where the mimeograph is in a bookcase over in the corner. But you'll find it. They couldn't, nobody would have destroyed those. Now that manual has been the backbone of Jewish Family Service from that time on. There always was a manual committee. And that manual is up to date today. Always. Never stopped working on it. Now that was the beginning of staff participation in the agency's program, because every page of that manual, the very first one that was written, was worked on in cooperation with the staff. They did a good deal of commenting and revising, and the committee of the staff worked on it from the beginning.
With the committee of the board?
No, it was the board. It was the board and the administration.
Total board.
No, not the board. The staff.
Yes.
Yes.
And the board was not involved?
Not in the
manual.
It wouldn't be, because it was the administrative procedures that were only being developed. The board was very much interested that it was being done, and they felt that it was commencing to pull things together in the agency, but they did not participate in the making of the manual. Later on, and there's another thing that you need to watch, to get. There should be in the office a copy of a special manual that we made for board members. And every one copy was always kept, so that when you revised it every year or 2 or 3, you should find every one of them there. Yes.
Marvelous.
And that will tell you a great deal about the board structure and the change of committee functions and the appointments of committees. And in those minutes of the various committees you will also get. And in the staff meetings are always there. Have you seen the staff minutes?
I haven't looked at those yet. Right now I'm looking at board minutes going back to 1902.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
And case committee
Yes.
minutes.
Well, the staff
And I'll
minutes.
get to the staff minutes.
Yes, those are all there.
Yes.
And they'll be a big help to you. I'd suggest that you, for at least 10 years, Alice Wolfson has been very much involved in the manual committee, and I would suggest that you talk to her. She's the director of the San Fernando Valley office.
What other, you said that there were problems with other agencies when you first arrived.
Well, there was not much communication with them. The agencies who were there were the Big Brothers, the Jewish Free Loan Hospital, the Jewish Family, the Jewish Aid Society started the first of the centers. At that time, there was the Boyle Heights District Office, and the agency out of Jewish Aid Society, out of its funds, established the first little center. And then it developed, and later it was separated. It was also an employment service. It was part of Jewish Family Service. Later on, it separated into a separate organization, because at that time, family agencies were a sort of catch-all. All these other supplementary services were part of the Jewish Family Service, the Jewish Aid Society.
The Jewish Family Service also did the background work for the Home for the Aged for admissions.
Yes, that came
Long
later.
time.
Yes, for a long, long time.
Yeah, I've seen references to that.
Yes.
What about the Federation? What was the function of the Federation?
Well, it was the same as it is now, except that it was, the function at that time, it was the Federation was just the Jewish agencies. It was separate from the
council.
Yes. And a not too good relationship existed for many years between them. The council really was a community organization body. It raised the money, the Federation got its money from the community chest, and
Well, the council came much later.
the council came many, many years later. Then there was a period of time, you can get that from their history, where the Federation and the council amalgamated and then separated again, and then came back again.
Oh, really? I didn't
Oh,
know.
yes. That was a very stormy period, but you can get that from Jewish business. See? And while that's not part of the Jewish Aid Society history, it had an impact on it.
I'm sure it did.
And is important, of course, to get into your history, which will be part of the community.
Right.
At the time, in 1928, the agency had no real relationship with the non-Jewish agency. And I was the first one that really moved into a relationship with non-Jewish agency
Through the chest?
through the Welfare Planning Council and the Community Chest.
Well, it said first. The first was the Council of Social Agencies, but I mean that was an offshoot of the test, wasn't it? Or was it
Came
first?
later. First
And
it was
the chest
the
came in
There always
24.
were committees in there.
The test came in 1924, I think.
Yes.
The other voice you hear is that of Mrs. Marie Saeda. Is that how you
Yeah.
pronounce it? Saeda.
Well, going back to the manual, that was the beginning of establishing formal relationships in the community between the agency. And it was the beginning of growing up. Then, little by little, the agency commenced to employ qualified people. At that time, I was in the Boyle Heights District Office as caseworker, and has written this first manual while I was a caseworker. Then, Mrs. Levin, who had been the executive director, she employed the first casework supervisor, who was a Mrs. Shencup. She was not there very long, about a year, maybe a year and a half. Mrs. Levin went east, and Mrs. Shencup took her place, and I became the casework supervisor. That lasted about a year, and then Mrs. Shencup left, and I became the director and moved, the executive director, and moved from Boyle Heights downtown to the main office, which by that time had moved into the building where the Union Bank is now. It was on 8th and Hill. And there were offices there. There was a district office in Boyle Heights and a small district office in Central Avenue and a very small district office in Temple Street. That was before the present, before the 610 Temple was built.
Right.
Now, somewhere in the files is a map that I made, a spot map that I made at that time. We were trying to find out where the Jewish community was. Now, originally, Temple Street was the center, and the Jews moved from Central Avenue to Boyle Heights. And then they moved to Central Avenue, south. Then they went to West Adams. Then they went to Beverly Fairfax, and then out to Beverly Hills. Now, the way I traced that was by getting the addresses of all the kosher meat markets from the slaughterhouses. And I got the addresses and spotted them by years, and you could, and the temples too, where the temples were, and you could see the circles as they moved south and west. Now, if you found that down at the office, then you'd really have an early, very interesting bit that could be part of a thesis. I hope you can find it.
I hope so too. That would be really helpful.
It really would.
Reproduce that possibly would be very graphic.
Right.
Very graphic. Well,
That's pretty ingenious to think of looking for kosher meat markets.
And
Well, you see, that was the basis for
Sure.
Jewish people always moved where there was, and you'd be interested to see how the first one got out to West Adams. Now, one of the first centers that was built, which was after the little one in the Floyd Heights, was done by renting a house in the Central Avenue district where the office was, and having a client live there and take care of the place, and pretty soon people started dropping in. And when you talk to Mrs. Levin, and she's away now, but she'll be back, she can tell you more about that because it was her idea. So I would suggest that you see her. She only lives a few blocks away from here. And she'll come over one day if you come back and talk.
Right.
Get a tape recording of her, because she was the first professional person, executive that they had. She did not have training. Later, when she went back to Chicago, she went to school of social work and got her master's degree. Later, spent her whole career in social work.
Did she come back here after?
Came back here years later and retired. But she worked for the California State Department of Social Service. Well, coming back then, gradually, when I became the director, we started to employ professional people. Little by little, the older people left, and the agency commenced to build up its professional program. And in the minutes of the case committee, which are there, you will see how things gradually moved up. In the beginning, the records will show that you didn't spend a dime that the board didn't approve. Now there's became different. You see what it is.
Literally a dime in the very early days.
How? There's one very interesting little piece in the minutes that is something to be quoted. But I remember I took before the board the fact that the new system was coming in, whereby a typewriter company, for 25 cents a typewriter, would clean the typewriter and put in a ribbon, new ribbon once a month. And we had 4 typewriters, and so it was for approval of $1 a month. And one of the board members said, well, let the girls put on their own ribbon. And that was not true.
That's in the minutes, the board minutes.
It's in the minutes. You might find it. So
I find all kinds of fascinating things.
Don't want to leave out, I think.
Yeah. So we moved up from there to professional group, and also casework procedures. The board gradually came to be related in a different way. That's all in the minutes. I don't even have to tell you about it. You'll see it's written down. And we moved on into the Depression. And it's all there. I don't have to tell you about it, what happened.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and then of course there was the whole business of relationship with public agencies. This too you'll find in a minute, how the Jewish community finally came to realize that they were part of the community too, and that Jewish people could be referred to the Bureau of Public Assistance. This was a long, hard struggle. It's in those minutes, and if later on you need more specific information about the details of that, we can talk about it all the time.
But you were involved in that whole struggle.
The whole struggle between the referral to public agency and the use of funds. And one of the interesting little things that Mrs. Levin said, and that I used a long time, was she had commenced to work on this and had a very difficult time, but she left then. But one of her little things was, well, if there was a fire in a Jewish home, should we call a Jewish fire department? It was a very telling thing, and it had a very good effect.
But there was great resistance on the part of the community for the referral of Jewish people.
Oh, the whole
An
community.
agency that wasn't Jewish.
And hostility. And at the time that I came there were dozens and dozens of the old pioneers who were on release, and it was my job to visit them and to see what I could do. And many of them, in the light of their relationship to the community,
I felt the agency should continue to assist financially as long as they live.
Well, it's the same way today with respect to the hospital care. There are some Jewish people who have to go to a Jewish hospital. They may be eligible for a public institution, but for them the hospital is seen because it's Jewish. Still persists.
Okay.
It still persists.
Sure. Still persists. And you'll always find some of that going on. Great deal. And people who contributors to the welfare fund today will say that the Jewish Family Service didn't help this person. It takes a great deal of constant interpretation, even now, although it's much different than it used to be. And then, following the war, there was all of this thing. In the beginning, when they were in the psychiatric research program, that's there too. The employment of workers that are qualified, the employment of psychiatric consultants. And isn't there a great deal of resistance on the part of both board and some staff and people in the community towards this change in the agency? But it's resisted and it grew and it developed.
Did you develop the idea of the consultation center?
Yes.
Would you tell me a little bit about that?
That was the first. The whole business of charging fees had come. And there was, you couldn't have it at that time. If you like it, you didn't go to the Jewish agency, charity, and people wouldn't come there. That was the beginning of the learning of the business of fees.
In the file. It's all there. But we did gradually, and so did in other parts of the United States, some agencies started to develop fee departments in the agencies. And New York was the place where they had the largest separate consultation center. And because of the fact that social work itself was commencing to be more and more professional, we came to the conclusion that it should be separated, that it should be part of the agency, and so it was closed. And we became, a little later, a couple of years later, we commenced to charge fees in the agency, and that whole development is also in minutes. There's one minute book on the consultation center and another book on fees. The whole development of fee scales and how we did it. And now, of course, everybody is charging, all agencies charge fees, and all of the professional development that came as a result of charging fees, you'll find recorded in the agency. Now, I just hope that nobody has destroyed any of this material, which all was there when I left 2 years ago.
That was a joint staff and board activity, because we felt that very important. That the board be brought along. Because the resistance.
Oh yes, that's all.
The resistance by the board is very evident, as well as resistance by the staff, the older members of the staff.
But it's all there.
I've seen some minutes of annual meetings. There was a period when we were having separate annual meetings.
Yes, they're there. Then we didn't have them.
A couple of sketches by the staff.
Mm-hmm. They were wonderful.
Yes, which they tried to...
And then the whole business, the whole history of the agency's involvement in the immigrant program. Now, I'm doing that. I'm doing a piece on that, which is a long, slow, laborious process. I have here all the minutes of the emigres, both Federation and Jewish Family Service. And that absorbed the agency for many years, from 1930 on, when it first became active in emigres. Now, those are all separate minutes, but they're also a good deal about that in Jewish Family Service minutes, so you'll find it there.
You're writing a history of the development of the emigre program, are you?
A long, slow, laborious process.
Now we get at the contribution, which is arguably being made to the whole national program.
What's that?
I said you're trying to get a true picture of where Los Angeles fit into the whole national program of to the highest.
We have that. That's all. What I'm missing, and I'm afraid that you might have trouble finding some records because there's a set of cards I'm searching for that unless we can find them will change the whole nature of what I'm trying to do. But they haven't found them yet. I don't know how much of the stuff you're going to find. I hope you can get it all.
Well, so far, it looks as if I'll find enough, certainly, to get a picture of the history of the agency.
It's in the minutes.
Yeah.
It's all there.
And it's pretty remarkable that there are minutes going back to 1902 that are still there, handwritten.
Yeah, it's very interesting how those were found. There was a little, one of those corrugated sheds in the back of the office of 610 Temple, like the construction people use. And stuff was just put in there. And one day I heard that they were going to burn it all. So I got very upset about that and decided, and went to the Federation and said, before you burn it, I want to go through it. And I went through it and pulled out everything that had to do with the Jewish Family Service.
Thank you.
But there was loads of other stuff, the Federation. I don't know. Now, later on, Julius Disnell, who knows an awful lot about the Jewish community and is the kind of person who says things and is interested in history, he must have gone through and pulled out a lot of Federation stuff because he did a lot of work on it. But I had everything that had to do with the Jewish Family Service. Now later, some of the stuff that the Jewish Family Service had did go over to the Federation for their archives, but you'll find it there. It's all documented.
I know I called Martin Ruderman and asked him whether he had any minutes of Federation board meetings, and he said that he has nothing that precedes the time when he became the director.
Well, Julius does know no more. I got, he had emigre minutes back to 1930, and I have those. They were bound. I talked to him about what kind of things
Yeah,
they
I'm
had.
planning to do that.
Yes.
But I just thought that Julie really had nothing to do with Federation in those days.
That's right. But later on,
he's the one
he did.
who stayed on.
Later on, he was the one who collected a great deal of material, and it has been bound, and it has been put into pretty good shape. You'll find it. Well, what other kinds of things would you like me to tell you?
I'd be interested in your ideas of what kind of changes you have seen in the approach of the agency from the time that you came. You mentioned the changing idea of the use of the community chest and county charities, VPA. Any other changes in
Well, the changes
philosophy?
in the agencies followed the development of family casework throughout the country. We became members of the Family Service Association of America. We were the first agency in Los Angeles that became a member of the Family Service Association of America. And I think you will need to look into the work of the Family Service Association of America. Also, you'll find in the agency, you should find, periodically studies were made of the agency by the Family Service Association of America so they were recertified each time. This was done, one was done since I left the agency, and Mr. Eisenstadt will have it. Also in the files for all the others. Now, there was a long period of time when they didn't study the Jewish Family Service at all because there were so many rapid developments of agencies throughout the country and throughout the West, and they studied the new agencies, and the older ones were not. But the whole agency developed. Now, some of the things we skipped in Jewish Family Service, you know that we were not in a hurry to adopt some things like the whole Philadelphia School and the Ronkian approach. We thought we'd wait about that. And a lot of the things that we never went into were things that were tried by other agencies and dropped. So ours was always a Freudian-oriented agency. And we would have workers come with a Ronkian background, and we would say, we're interested in what you have to offer, and we would like to see you practice some of your theories here. with the understanding that you do not come here to reorient our agency. We're basically Freudian, but we're interested in what you do. We are interested in the eclectic approach, and we'll listen. And we can learn from you, but you can learn from us. So we were not in the forefront of taking on every new fad that came along. And, agencies, it all modified itself later, and the Jewish Family Service adopted some of the new things that were done, but we were not ones to make a break like some of the agencies did. And I'm reading a book now. It's 300,000 New Americans, which is about the Emigre program. In there, it tells a lot about different approaches to the emigre, and there's a very interesting case history as well as the whole procedure of what they call their application process, which took a month. And that was part of the whole Ronkian thing, before. So we never used that. They did, and they used it with the emigres. And in the end, the author said, not all agencies use this approach. And later they changed it. It didn't really work with the emigres because it had in it inherently this feeling, well, they mustn't be too secure in the fact that they're going to get help, because then they won't do enough for themselves and so forth. Well, some of them needed a lot of security after their concentration camps. And in the whole emigre program, it's interesting, the development here followed the development of the national program. We did very much the same kinds of things related to this community. So I think when you look at the development of the whole family field, you'll get the professional development of the agency. And since I left in the past 3 years, and you'll bring yours clear up to date, read Mr. Eisenstadt's monthly letters to the board and staff. And in there you'll see what's happened in the last 3 years, with a lot of new things happening that are in line with what's happening today. Up to the change in that Mrs. Saida mentioned the other day, and that Mrs. Freda Burnside, one of the she was the former field person of the Family Service of America, and I talked with her over the telephone. She's in Washington, D.C., and she mentioned that in the Family Service Association of America, the changes are being made. Now the suggestion is made that there be client representation on the board, just in the same way that there's student representation on boards of trustees and curricula committees. So you'll find a more rapid change in the last 3 years than you'll find years before, and Mr. Eisenstadt's letters will give you that, because it's what happened in the agency. And I was at a brunch yesterday at which a number of the members of the staff were present. And in the talk that went around, I could see a lot of things that were different. Now, you see then, there was that long period of time when you just didn't employ anybody who did not have a master's degree from the School of Social Work. Nobody. And volunteers have nothing to do with professional aspects. Now, Jewish Family Service has the best volunteer program in the state. And they do have aids, and there are changes.
Yeah, I'm very much interested in that. I want to take a look at that.
It's a perfectly marvelous thing, and should play a very important part in the history, the whole development of that. And now there's a half-time supervisor.
You mentioned the fact of the group therapy, which was such a difficult thing for the older members, both of the staff and the board. That's all. The new modality, what's the word you used?
Yes, the new modality, it's all there, how that got developed from the very beginning, and the resistance there was against it. And there's minutes there, the resistance against fees, board and staff. And then, you'll find it, we finally got some money and had a dietitian from the state of California come in who went over the budget, which was used as a basis for charging fees. And we had board and staff were on that. Fees were always a matter of both board and staff. And I'll never forget, at the end of one of those meetings, one of the board members said, well, we don't have to worry about the budget on which you base it. It's all there. And everybody, board, were you at those meetings, do you remember?
Yes, sure.
Board and staff felt that they learned an awful lot about money through these marvelous meetings on how you construct a budget. All the way from the very beginning, when we weren't referring cases to the Bureau of Public Assistance or the county, because they didn't give enough. And then the whole business of supplementing came up. That's a long, long story. And it took many years. There was two budgets, one for those who were kosher and those who were not kosher. That was done away with as the agency moved along. And it took a long time for the agency to realize that it had a responsibility beyond the Jewish community. What about those people at the county who were getting so much less money than we thought a person could live on, family could live on? And then I must tell you one little story because it was part of my own development in that. And you won't remember because you're too young.
I'm not that young.
When the milk used to be delivered in these little white milk wagons driven by a horse. You remember that? That had a little thing down. Well, I had read that if malnutrition did not set in during the first 5 years of life, it could be cured. And we were in the Depression. People were out of work. And it said a quart of milk for every child. And I decided that we'd have to have a quart of milk for every child. And the board went along with that. The Arden Creamery, Mrs. Birch was one of the leading, the Birch family owned the Arden Creamery. We got a special rate. And we were distributing in Boyle Heights during the Depression a quart of milk to every family, for every child. And the milkman was there to help us. He would report if a family sold a quart of milk or if the right number of bottles were on. But we knew anyway because every child was examined every month at the clinic. And if the child did not gain weight, then there was something wrong. And this went on, the board members would come out. We had milk checks. And the first of the month, they were rolled in rolls like the bank does for every member of the family, and we had a card index. So we were spending an awful lot of money. And finally, some of the people from the Federation who were involved in this too, they appointed a committee because we were spending a lot of money in relief, and the Federation was giving us this money. So they sent a committee out to look into the matter of milk. And we had the card in. Mrs. Schiff used to do this. We had a card index of every family and how many children they had and how many quarts of milk they had and so forth and so on. And they decided that was good. And the whole agency gave a quart of milk for every child. And then one day the milkman said to me, Miss Mohr, do you have a little time? And I said, yes. He said, I want you to go with me. And I got into his milk wagon. And he said to me, you are giving a quart of milk for every Jewish child. What about the Mexican children? What about the Catholic children? What about the Protestant children? There wasn't a Protestant Family Agency. There was Salvation Army. There was Volunteers of America. He took me over in Boyle Heights to a place where there was, we called it the Gully. That was where Mexican and Negro people lived. And the county wasn't even giving them enough money to pay for gas. And they were cooking out in the open over fires. They didn't get any milk. That's when I left the office and went to the Catholic Welfare Bureau, wondering if you getting milk. And I went on a milk campaign then in the community, which was really my first step out into the community. And for years and years, we got milk from Fresno where they were having a milk board. Instead of pouring it in the streets, it came down here. And it went to San Francisco. And for years after that, they used to call me the milk person, and any problem that came up for milk. In fact, about 5 years ago, someone called me and said, "We understand that you know about milk."
Isn't that interesting?
And there's one part that I don't want to remind me. I don't want it to go on your tape recorder, but I'll tell you something else about that later. So then, you see, we moved out into the community, and we did things about the county budget. And I'll never forget the day that Monsignor Dwyer of the Catholic Welfare, long dead now, you see, finally the State Relief Administration came in. And finally the State Relief Administration was going out. And the county said they wouldn't help those people. And early one morning, Father O'Dwyer called me and said, "There's a meeting at the Board of Supervisors. And we have to go there." Before that, when the state dropped the Jewish families, we picked them all up. And they went right on budget because there was going to be a struggle to get the county to take it over. But the Jewish families were receiving full relief, and the Catholic families were too. So Monsignor called me early in the morning, and he said, "There's a meeting at 9 o'clock. He said, "Can you get Rabbi Magnan?" And I called Rabbi Magnan. He was at breakfast, and I said, "You better come. We have to go to the Board of Supervisors." And I will never forget that as long as I live, because there were hundreds of clients that packed the meeting, and in walked, with placards, and in walked Monsignor O'Dwyer. He met at our office, and I quickly told Rabbi Magnan what it was about. And the three of us walked in there. We passed between all the clients, up to the rostrum, you know. And I never will forget Rabbi Magnan's speech, at the end of which time the county took all the state relief families. So that this was part of moving out into the community, and from then on, as the community chest developed, and the Federation moved in, agencies moved into the community chest, the Jewish community always played a very important part in developing the whole community. And I spent as much time in the community almost as I did in Jewish family services. And others of the Jewish community did too. Although in the beginning they used to refer to me as the white Jew.
What about, the last time that I met with you, you talked a little bit about Dr. Cohen and your differences in...
Oh, you were talking about Jewish content.
Yeah, Jewish content.
Well,
I'd like to talk just a little bit about that.
Well, Dr. Cohen always felt that Jewish social workers did not have enough Jewish content.
Mm-hmm.
And that they weren't Jewish enough. And you see, they really were not trained in a Jewish school. Dr. Hart had been head of a Jewish school. It closed. What you really had were Jewish social workers going to schools of social work, but not to Jewish schools of social work. Of course, the rabbis felt keenly that we weren't Orthodox enough. And the Federation was always the sort of a Jewish German. And up to this very day, relationships with the rabbis have always been tough. First, because rabbis don't like to deal with women. And second, because they don't think they're Jewish enough, because really the rabbis would feel that the responsibility was theirs to give tzedakah. Now, you'll need in your history to put something about Jewish content. There are two people that I think know the most. Well, one person who knows the most about it is not here, and that's Charles Bell, a real student of it, and somehow, somewhere, for you to get orientation to the whole problem of Jewish content, I would suggest that you read Dr. Coe's and that you talk sometime to Charlie Bell, because we've had many discussions over it. And you see, I always felt Jewish family service is itself Jewish service. Year after year after year, the Jewish people came. Now, not all our caseworkers are Jewish. And I would say that one of the most knowledgeable caseworkers we ever had was not Jewish in terms of the use of Jewish and mores and understanding. Now, you know, in Boyle Heights, we were dealing entirely with the Orthodox Jewish people. Well, we don't have very many Orthodox people among our agencies. Everybody speaks English. A comparatively small percentage of people speak kosher houses. And we're down into our fourth generation of American Jews. So you don't have some. Now, I do think that there is a difference. I think that a Jewish caseworker understand if she came from an Orthodox background like I did, it wouldn't be true of some of those who did not come from an Orthodox background. When a Jewish mother weeps because her son became a robber instead of a rabbi, I think there's something about my generation of Jewish social workers to understand that in a different way. But I would say that you will not find a great deal of Jewish content in the case records of the Jewish Family Service, or the Jewish Big Brothers, or the Jewish Committee for Personal Service, or the CSWA. Now there's more of it, I think, in the East than there is here.
I would think so.
Yes.
I've been going through the journals of Jewish Family Service and across a little section of the meeting where you are addressing the question of Jewish content that in 1930s. And my impression is that there were a handful of people who, over the years in the national conference of Jewish social workers, insisted that if a social service agency did not do it with any function, the making sure that Jewish customs and Jewish life survived, and have no right to exist. And Dr. Cohen is one of the advocates. But I had the feeling that he was in a very small minority.
Yes.
And year after year, he would make a similar kind of appeal. Most would be, you do